Hello, everybody. John Johnston, CornNation. I thought I'd talk about the 2022 Nebraska football offensive line. Everybody seems to be all bent out of shape and up in the air about what quarterbacks we're going to get. And my thought is, if you have a good offensive line, you just hand the ball off and get 3-4 yards a carry or 5 yards a carry. A la Matt Turman, the Terminator. I know I'm going back to the 90s. We'll stop that right now. But offensive line, the 2022 offensive line, who's gone? Cam Jurgens is gone. That is a big loss because Cam Jurgens, we all saw him get used to being a center with all the high snaps, and then he figured it out. And then he became an all-Big Ten, third team, but an all-Big Ten center. So conference honors. If he'd have stuck around for another year, that had probably gone up to, maybe he'd have been the best center in the Big Ten. Maybe he'd been second team, but he would have improved. His draft stock probably would have gone up too, but he won't be back, and that's a huge loss for the offensive line. Matt Sichterman is the other kid that won't be back. I say kid, they're giant human beings. Sichterman started all 12 games last season at right guard. So another big loss, another replacement that we have to find. And let's look at the incoming people. We have recently transfer portal guy. We've got Hunter Anthony from Oklahoma State. Played tackle. Did not start a game last season, but played in every game. A depth guy, pretty much. Maybe you could start at Nebraska. We have Kevin Williams coming back. He's an Omaha North grad. Played at Northern Colorado. Again, a transfer portal type of guy. And then we have one guy in the 2022 recruiting class, Justin Evans-Jenkins. And I know it's probably bothering some of you that we only have one offensive line recruit, the 2022 class, but we'll get to that in a bit. Let's look at who we're going to have, potential starters on our offensive line. So at left tackle, we have Turner Corcoran. Backup, Ezra Miller. At left guard, we have Nuruddin Nuwili, who started a lot of games in 2021 at left guard, and it took him a while to get there. And once you saw him play at left guard, you were kind of like, why in the hell wasn't this guy in the starting lineup all along? Ethan Piper, backup. At center, and remember, we're replacing Cam Jurgens here. Trent Hickson probably starting at center. Ethan Piper, maybe the backup. The other possibility there is Nuruddin Nuwili as a backup. I think he just seems to be a natural at the guard position, and I think Scott Frost at one time said that he would be the backup center going forward. So you have a bunch of guys, different guys in the mix there. Right guard, you've got Brock Bando, senior, and then three guys whose names I just kind of threw in here just so I could say them. Joey Mancino, because, Mancino, he's from New Jersey. Sounds like a mob guy. I'm perfectly happy with having a guy that can put hits on defensive line players, playing on our offensive line. Noah Stefersky, walk-on guy from Nebraska. Stefersky, it sounds like a great name. Sounds like a guy you don't ever want to get into a bar fight with. Brant Banks. Now, Brant Banks is probably more of a tackle, but I'm sticking him in a guard just because, people could be multifaceted. And then at right tackle, my favorite guy, Bryce Benhart. And then Ian Boerkircher, whose name I'm probably butchering, and I butcher many names on account of I don't speak well sometimes. But my buddy Bryce and Turner Corcoran to a certain extent. I first bitched about Bryce Benhart out loud by name in the 2020 Minnesota loss, where he gave up a sack and Adrian, our beloved Adrian Martinez, coughed up the football. And in that video, I said, Bryce, if you can't fucking block a guy, you should hold him because they don't call holding. And I was very emphatic about that. And I have sworn at Bryce Benhart many times in many reaction videos. He and Turner Corcoran last season were probably two of the worst starting tackles of any Division I team. And they were bad. And I'm going to ask you to do something with these guys. I'm going to try to do this myself. What I want us to do is I want us to wipe the slate clean for them. Okay? Because we have a new offensive line coach coming in, Donovan Raiola. And, you know, let's say you're at your job and you're not fitting well with your manager and you're not doing as well and your confidence is shot and everything's shit. And suddenly you get a new guy come in and he's your boss and you're like, my world is much brighter. I will do a much better job. Now, I'm not saying Greg Austin is a bad coach. What I'm saying is, when you go back and look at our offense, I think there was a lot of things wrong and probably just it was dysfunctional. And to me, there were maybe there were communication issues. Maybe people didn't get along. Maybe, just maybe, it was Scott Frost. Because Scott Frost's hands weren't on the defense, and the defense played pretty well. So maybe if Scott Frost, with all these new offensive coaches, just stays the fuck out of the offense, maybe it'll be a good offense, and maybe part of that is the offensive line, and maybe that translates down to Donovan Raiola being a good guy in a good position, and therefore that goodness will trickle down rating on top of our offensive tackles, Bryce Benhart and Turner Corcoran, and they will become good players. Now, the other guy I haven't mentioned yet is Teddy Prohaska. He ended his season last year against Michigan. He had a season-ending injury, and I think that you saw the offensive line take a pretty huge hit when he went out of the lineup. So him coming back will be a big boost. Maybe Hunter Anthony will be a huge addition to the offensive line. And we'll see where it goes. Now, let's go back for a minute to that whole one offensive lineman, taken in the 2022 recruiting class. Why is that? That's because if you go through our offensive line roster, and I haven't named all of them. I mean, there's a whole gob of other guys in here. Riley Moses, Sam Hoskinson, Keegan Menning, who is a giant, huge guy from Fremont. Maybe he's in the mix. Bo Schaller, Michael Lynn, and another giant guy, Alex Kahn, from Derby, Kansas. When you look at our offensive line roster, that position group, these guys are all really young. You have Trent Hickson as a senior and Brock Bando as a senior. Everyone else is underclassmen of the names I mentioned as potential starters. So Turner Corcoran, Ezra Miller at left tackle, both sophomores. Ethan Piper, sophomore. Nuruddin Newili, junior. Joey Mancino, redshirt freshman. Noah Stefersky, sophomore. Brant Banks, sophomore. Bryce Benhart, sophomore. Now you see why we need to wipe the slate clean. You know, and let those guys start over and just clear our minds of the negativity and let goodness come into our minds and hearts about our offensive line in 2022. But we have a whole crap load of young players at offensive line, and the hope is, the projection is, our desire is that Donovan Raiola could come in and make this offensive line much better than it was. Now, if you go back and look at the 2021 season, our offense wasn't terrible. In fact, it had the overall statistics, you looked at it, and it was one of the better offenses in the Big Ten. Where did it fail? In the red zone, which is why we all bitched about special teams. If our special teams was just a little bit better, we'd have won some of those games. No, if our offense scored in the fucking red zone as much as they ran up and down the field until they got to the 20, we'd have won most of those games. And why did we fail in the red zone? Well, that's a whole different other video. But there's your offensive line. I think our offensive line could be pretty decent in 2022. You know, you got Prohaska back. You got some guys that gained good experience. We need the resurrection of the two guys I mentioned, Ben Hart and Corcoran. We can't just throw them away because they're talented, good players, and they have experience. We just need them to move their feet better. And hopefully Donovan Raiola can bring that around. Center position, you know, I think Trent Hickson, Nurden, Newely, those guys probably can get into that position and do pretty well. Is this one of the best offensive lines in the Big Ten? That remains to be seen. I mean, this is a really early look. Did we get anything out of the transfer portal? You know, we got a guy that probably looks pretty solid in terms of adding depth. Not sure if he can be a starter. So that's your offensive line going into 2022. I keep wanting to go back to that hope word. You know, the off season is the sugar drink consuming time, and I'm trying hard with it. I really am. I'll try to be. If you got this far in this video, thank you. Subscribe, please. You're supposed to ring the bell or something to get notifications for new videos. We'll see what I can come up with. Take care of yourselves. I hope you had a happy new year. This is a new year, and we can do marvelous new things with it. Go Big Red.